So we are starting our biology in chapter 11, and we're going to be ending the semester with chapter 12. So we're kind of speeding through all of this. So what's chapter 11 about? It's going to be about the integumentary, excretory, endocrine, and reproductive systems. So the first thing they talk about here is homeostasis, the design for maintaining homeostasis. Well, what's homeostasis? Well, when we think of homeostasis, you think of a home, don't you? That's what I think, home staying. So it's the built-in maintenance of a stable home, internal environment. It keeps us stable, keeps our body stable. The first three systems here, integumentary, excretory, and endocrine, they basically provide this homeostasis. The integumentary is the shield of that our skin provides. The excretory basically gets rid of our waste products, and the organs being, the main organ being the kidney there. And onto the endocrine, and the endocrine being our hormones. And these are these chemical messengers that keep us in homeostasis. So the first we're going to talk about in this first section is the integumentary system. So the integumentary system, you see this picture here of skin. So the skin is the main organ of this system, but also did you know that the skin is the largest organ in your body? So kind of a test question. Largest organ in your body is what? The skin. And it's a protective shield. It's about 20 to 25 feet as you go through that, square feet. And onto, it's a tenth of an inch in your soles. That's pretty thick. Your soles are your feet, to 100 to 1/250th on your eyelids. So it goes from pretty thin on your eyelids. The integumentary system consists not only of your skin, but of your hair follicles, of your sweat glands, of your sebaceous glands. All of these are in the skin, or the integumentary system. So the protective shield, first of all, it's for communication with the world, really, because our skin communicates, what we should do, what it should do in protecting us, right? And not just our sense organs, but our skin does in the sensation of touch, for sure. It's also the organ of secretion. So it cools the body with our sweat glands. And the blood vessels are very good in doing this too, because the blood vessels, the diameters, dilate and constrict. Dilate when we're hot and constrict when we're cold. So these are very important things when doing with temperature, when it has to do with temperatures and temperatures that we're in. It's also the organ of ridding of waste products, and we'll find this in our sweat glands. And again, it coats our skin with oil, so our skin won't dry out. All of these things being not only an organ of secretion, but it's also a mechanical shield that prevents microorganisms and chemicals from getting in, bacteria and virus and such. And the keratin on our skin is a very resistant and protecting coat to protect us from these invaders that could come in and make us sick with different kinds of infections. So communication, sense receptors in the skin notify the brain of conditions affecting the body temperature, pressure, and pain. So the skin communicates. The secretion of the skin provides moisture and oil to the body, and then protection. The skin prevents harmful microorganisms. Those are the things you need to know. So let's go on to the next here. The layers of the integumentary system. So let's talk about this. So before we get not just to the layers, we're going to talk about the layers, but we're also going to talk about the organs within our layers here. So the layers, a guy named Marcello Malpighi, kind of a weird name, huh? He lived in 1628 to 1698. He was an Italian scientist, and he took a slide and looked at the tissue types and then he looked into the layers. Way back in 1600s, he was looking at the skin and describing the skin. So remember, his name is Marcello Malpighi. So, and going on from there, we've learned a lot of things about the skin. First of all, there's the 4 different tissue types. Let's think of the types. The types are not listed here, but there's 4 types of tissues in your body. Epithelial tissues, muscle tissues, nerve tissues, and connective tissues. So when we talk about the skin, we're going to talk about epithelial. So remember the word epithelial. That's the skin. Of course, we have muscle tissues and nerve tissues and connective tissues too. But let's talk about the layers of the skin. So the epithelial has layers from top to bottom. Maybe we can see this a little closer here. See if I can. There you go. Can you see it closer? There we go. So we have the epidermis, the dermis, and the subcutaneous. Okay, there you go. And these layers, well, that's what we're going to be talking about. Look at the picture there, and you'll see the epidermis is the outer layer. The dermis is going to be a large layer where a lot of blood vessels are, and we're going to find a lot of organs there too, or these different cells there. And onto the subcutaneous level, being that fat layer. See the white fat layer here. So we have the epidermis here, protection, more protection, the blood vessels that supply the skin, and down to the subcutaneous level. The epidermis, that's what we're going to be talking about. So the epidermis, well, actually we're going to be talking about the skin, but we're going to be talking about each one. But we're going to talk about the epidermis first. But let's go over here to this picture. Back up here a little bit. You can see, maybe see that picture. I'm going to put it like that. About that, a little down a little bit so you can see it. So the epidermis is exposed to the environment. So that's this layer up here that's exposed. The epidermis is the squamous and has the epithelial cells. The squamous means flat. So the cells are usually flat, and usually the cells are dead, because the cells actually, a lot of our skin cells come off. So those cells are always pushed to the top of the epidermis. So they're onto the epithelial. Epithelial is another name for the epithelial, or the top of the epidermis. So the germinative cells. Germinative means reproducing cells. For something to germinate means to reproduce, right? And they basically, these cells, they don't have any blood cells, but they're nourished by the dermis here. And these older cells push themselves to the surface. So there's the germinative cells, and then you have the dead cells, right? And the germinative cells are stimulated by rubbing. Excess rubbing produces calluses. And of course, calluses are a bigger layer, mostly of dead cells there. And usually these cells, these germinative cells in the epidermis, are replaced like 27 days. So we're looking at this layer, and you're looking at these cells here now. Conditions, the conditions of the epidermis, certain disease conditions actually. One of it is psoriasis. Psoriasis starts with a P, Psoriasis, meaning, but psoriasis is an immune attack where your body's attacking, like almost autoimmune, is attacking the epidermis. And the epidermis is forming, really rapidly forming these epithelial cells, these and the dead cells, and they're coming, and so they have a very hard, patches of skin on their body, red patches of skin that are very flaky, skin's flaking off. That's psoriasis. And then we have a condition called dandruff, and dandruff too is when the scalp cells are producing too much too much epithelial, too much keratinization. Keratinization is basically, let's get up here so you can see. Keratinization, right here's how you spell it. Keratin and keratin. Keratinization is a hardening, and keratin is this tough, waterproof protein fiber that's manufactured in the cytoplasm that strengthens and hardens the cells, producing things like our nails, the hardness of our fingernails and toenails. 90% go through this keratinization process. And so when you have excess hardening and excess of that, it's just basically your body keratinizing too quickly, you know. So the nails have, like I said, more keratinization than anything else in our body, making our nails hard. In the germinative layer, we have another type. It's called melanin. These specialist cells that produce a pigment called melanin. They're called melanocytes. Melanocytes produce melanin, right? So you could imagine. So melanocytes are 10% of the cells, and everybody has melanocytes. We all have the same amount. Let's just say that. So it's not that you have more melanocytes, but it's because you have more melanin. And what is melanin? Melanin is a pigment that's in the melanocytes that makes our skin color what it is. The more melanin we have, the darker our skin will be. And the less melanin have, our skin will be lighter. And freckles are uneven melanin. So melanin is very important. So let's go back down here because we're going to look at the other layers too. So, another thing about melanin, if you have a lot of carotenoids, like carrots, like vitamin A, carotenoids in your body, your skin tends to be kind of an olive color. And then if you have a lot of hemoglobin, you have really high hemoglobin, like some people do, your skin will have a reddish tint, like you have a lot of blood, so your hemoglobin in your blood, which makes it red. So usually your skin color is inherited. So usually if you have, your parents have dark skin, you'll probably have dark skin. But sometimes people will come up as a condition called albino. And what that is they have no melanin because their body is not producing any melanin. So their skin is a very, very white colored, and they end up having to basically hide from the sun because they have no protection of the sun. Albino cannot produce melanin. So now let's talk about this area, which is the dermis. The dermis is the most complex. You can see here we have the epithelium up here, this small, and then we have this dermis. So you can see all the things that are going on in the dermis. So the dermis has elastin and collagen. You know, it's made of that, so it gives very much the elasticity of our skin, makes our skin a lot more elastic, but the elasticity decreases with age, of course. As we get older, our skin becomes less elastic and it sags more, right? So, but anyway, going on, the elastin and collagen are in our skin, and as you can see, there's a lot of nerve endings. We have like nerves. Here's a nerve coming up through the dermis, and a lot of blood vessels, as we have the blood vessels there. And you'll see that there's a lot of, if you saw here, you can't really see there's the nerve. You can't really see the blood vessels so much, but the blood vessels will be throughout. Well, here's the blood vessel right here, coming through up here, and through hair follicle actually, but here's the blood vessels coming and being there. So there's a lot of blood vessel, and the hair follicles are coming through the dermis there. Also, we have these sweat glands called sebaceous glands. There's a sweat duct here and a sweat gland and a nerve ending here. So there's a lot of stuff in their dermis. And then we have the subcutaneous level here. And the subcutaneous level is basically where the fat layer kind of, see all these little adipose tissue here, so it cushions our skin. And it's the deepest level. And you can see there's nerves there, and it's where the hair follicle starts, and there's blood vessels. in our subcutaneous level. So let's go on to the next here. So we hear there the variety of skin colors with melanin, right? We see there. Well, there's tanning and sunburn. And so you can imagine some people tan easier than others. But the tanning is a natural process that protects us from UV rays, ultraviolet light of the sun. And the more melanin we have, then the more protection we have. So the lighter, fairer skinned people end up getting sunburn easily and don't tan as well. So the sunburns can be this red, swollen, irreversible sometimes, and cumulative, which means that if you get sunburns quite a lot, your skin is going to have a lot of dead skin, and you're basically going to have problems, maybe even problems having cancer. So you need to protect you from this UV light, ultraviolet light. Skin cancer mutates very quickly, so it's very important that you protect your skin. And it may not be absorbed by the melanin, but skin cancer has a 95% of cure rate as long as you get it right away. There's two different kinds of cancers that are pretty easily controlled, and that's basal cell and basal cell carcinoma, they call it, and then there's squamous cell carcinoma. And these are two different types of skin cancer that can happen. But there's also a third type. Well, there's more than a third type, but one of the types that are most dangerous is melanoma. And melanoma can actually move very quickly with these dark brown patches, usually with moles and such, and that could cause metastasis, and you can die pretty quickly with melanoma. So it's the most serious type of cancer there. So let's see. So in fact, the best way to protect yourself, the best medicine is prevention. Make sure you wear sunscreen, at least a SPF of 15 or higher when you're in the sun a lot. Moving to Florida here, we have to know that we need to do that. So let's talk about the hair now. The hair grows from the hair follicle. So we saw the picture of the hair follicle in the last, and it's basically built with epidermal cells that are keratinized. Remember we talked about keratinized, and they die and push the dead cells up and up and up, and your hair grows more and more. Here's a picture of the squamous epithelial cell, non-reproducing skin cells, and the germinative cells right here. Here's the melanocyte. And a hair shaft coming here, so you can see the layers of the epidermis now, and you can see where the hair follicles are coming through. So if you have a follicle that's straight, like a straight follicle, or let's see, I think that the follicles that are totally round are straight hair, and if they're kind of curved, little oval, then that makes the hair follicle curly hair. And then if they're really extreme flat, you get very kinky hair, or very curlier hair, I should say. And the color is in the melanin. So melanocytes are at the bottom of the hair follicle, and they're the genetic genes give us our hair color. If there's no pigments in our hair though, our hair becomes white or gray. And also things like drugs and burns and disease and fever and all these things can affect our hair growth. So let's see. Hair aids homeostasis, it says it. Basically, different hair, like in your eyebrows, keeps the sweat out of your eyes. Eyelashes protects your eyes from getting particles in your eyeballs. And then your ear hair, even ear hair and nose hair, filters things out from getting in your ears and into your respiratory system. Even your armpit hair, sometimes it reduces friction and helps, and also hair helps the sense of touch. So you wouldn't think so, but your hair does help so that you can feel better and feel touch, because there's nerve endings in the follicles of your hair. An erector pili is a muscle that's in next to your hair follicle, and when it contracts, it gives you goose pimples. And it also helps warm your skin. It alerts you to warm up if you're like shivering. So that's important. And sometimes you get those goose pimples when you just hear something, oh, wow, that's cool. And then you get goose pimples. God gave us goose pimples for a reason. And those erector pili in your skin, I should say. Okay, let's go to the sebaceous glands. What are the sebaceous glands? I'm going to keep going through this here. So, okay. Oh, here's the anatomy of a hair follicle here. So you can see the hair shaft coming down here. And here's the root. Here's the hair follicle. The hair follicle. Here's the hair shaft coming up. The core, the root coming up here. So you can see pretty cool. The anatomy, close-up of a hair shaft. Wow. Look at that underneath the microscope. So I like this part too. You can read this for yourself, but it basically says how compliant, design of living creation, compliant skin, how compliant our skin is and how it protects us, but it also, it protects more for your compliancy, meaning that your bones move easier, everything moves easier. It makes life easier because our skin is so compliant. It's not a tough thing to do. So you can read that whole thing. It's like, I like the idea of saying your skin is compliant, so let's go on to the next. Okay, going on to the next, we're talking about sebaceous glands. What are sebaceous glands? They're sweat glands. And we saw those sweat glands in our last, when we were looking at our skin, the dermis of our skin. But sweat glands are associated with our hair follicles sometimes too. And there's sebum. It's called sebum. And here's some trapped sebum and sebum. Sebum is what the glands, the sebum puts out. The glands put out. And this is makes oil, is an oil that waters our skin with oil and makes our skin soft and flexible. But sometimes, especially teenagers, they get too much of this oil and it causes an imbalance, especially because the hormones make them produce more, and you can get blackheads, which are hair follicles there that are infected and onto bacteria infections because of the sebum. So here we have, let me go, move it over here so you can see better, maybe up a little there. So we have the sebaceous glands here, the epidermis, and you have the dermis down here, and you have coming down here, you'll see this trapped sebum coming up here in the hair follicle and the formation of some pus, gross. And then it ruptures into the dermis and you can get acne. So it's a picture of, kind of picture that you don't like to see because it happens to all of us. So also the sebaceous gland, the sweat glands, regulate our body temperature. So that means they cools us. As sweat evaporates on our skin, it cools our skin. And so it's a very, very good way of cooling us off when it gets extremely hot out and humid. It also, the glands also remove nitrogenous wastes, which are waste through our skin. So our skin gets rid of it. So it's an excretory organ too. And in fact, it loses between 100 and 600 milliliters, which is like 2 to 3 glasses of water a day on a hot day. So we lose that much water through our sweat glands. And if we're dehydrated, the dehydrated is a thing that we don't want to happen, but we can dehydrate if we have lost too much. And we can also have muscle cramps. Dehydration produces this muscle cramps, and we can go into heat exhaustion or heat stroke. For elderly people have the heat stroke. So these pores opening in our skin, here's a picture of skin pore. Let's look at that. See that skin pore right there? That's a close-up. Wow, close-up of a pore. The opening in the skin in our sweat ducts and you can see here where the water and sodium and salt, and these come from these pores in our skin too, the sweat glands. Skin regulates our temperature through not only just the skin, but the hypothalamus. one of our organs in our body there that signals the sweat glands so that we perspire. If the temperature gets above 98.6 degrees, the hypothalamus says, okay, we need to, it's getting hot, we need to cool the skin, and it starts producing the sweat and then cools in evaporation. It also dilates our blood vessels to cool us off too. When it's really hot, our blood vessels get dilated and more so to cool us, and then when it gets really cold, our blood vessels constrict to conserve heat. So this picture is, doesn't have a picture here, but you can see, you can know that even the elderly sometimes, because they have drier skin and they don't have sweat glands, they can die with heat stroke. So let's go on to the next here, see what we're going to go on to burns, but before we go down to burns, quickly, there's some things. Dermatitis is called infection on bacteria in the skin. And if you have a virus on your skin, it could be a wart. A wart is another problem. Our yeast infection on your skin is like athlete's foot, like fungus. And then of course we have mites and ticks and fleas. Those things, they can infect our skin too. There's parasites like chiggers, red bugs, lice in the grass, or whatever. These things can actually get in and cause you problems in your skin. Fleas used to bring bubonic plague, the Black Plague at one time. So all of these are very much things that attack us through. Head lice is another one, and they produce nits and eggs. Have you ever heard of the word nitpicking? That means nits, these head lice that go into our hair and such. Ticks are another thing. They're blood-sucking, and they can produce diseases like Lyme's disease and Rocky Mountain spotted fever. So let's end up here with burns here. So let's talk about what burns. Burns, there could be different levels of burns: 1st degree, 2nd degree, and 3rd degree. 1st degree is just pale and red, and you could, when you get a 1st degree burn, you could put just cold water and apply first aid cream, and it should be fine. The 1st degree is like it damages only the epidermis, the top part. And then we have 2nd degree, and that produces blisters and sores, and it's the damage of the top part of the dermis too. So, and you immerse in cold water, cover with cold compresses, bandage, and see the doctor. Do never break the blisters of a burn, okay? On to the 3rd degree. This is where the skin turns black or white, and the tissue is exposed and may damage the nerves. And it may be numb, and maybe you can't feel it because it's been damaged so bad. That's the 3rd degree, destroys the epidermis and dermis. And so this is a deep burn. So also with burns, you have a person has a severe loss of body fluids. So they need to have IVs. If they're severely burned, you need to have IV fluids constantly, because otherwise your blood pressure can fall and you go into shock. So you're going to need IV blood plasma sometimes too, because you've lost the plasma because of the burns, especially if you're burned on a big part of your body. So, and with burns, infection is a major problem. So if you have a burn, no matter what the burn is, infection is a problem. So you need to make sure you keep it clean. Put a sterile bandage on them with cream on it, that's for sure, for a minor burn. But when there's a major burn in the hospital, a lot of people with major burns have to go to the hospital, and they have to be in a sterile room with sterile bandages to prevent infection, because infection can happen very quickly with burns. And sometimes burns need skin grafts too, so that's important. So anyway, so that's it for the integumentary, and now we're going to go on to the next, which would be, let's see, the excretory system. So it's important, but how the skin is amazing, how God gave us the skin to protect us from all of these invaders that could get into our body. So what a major, the skin is our largest organ in our body, huh? So, okay.